Okay, so which one would I pick? Supra or new Nissan Z? Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be comparing the all-new Toyota Supra to the all-new Nissan Z. This is going to be an awesome comparison. First and foremost though, a huge shout out and thank you to the Tim Daly Ford here in Spanish Fork, Utah for giving me some time with this Supra. This is actually my old Supra that they have for sale. This is like a huge coincidence that the week that I have the Nissan Z is the same week that, well, my old Supra gets traded in, and now we have this comparison happening. I'm going to include a link to their inventory in the description down below where you can check out this Supra. They also obviously sell the new Ford product as well, so definitely check them out. And then on a side note, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get right into it. Talk about visibility before we set off here on the Supra. Visibility of the hood, you guys can see the heads-up display, hopefully. Both the mirrors, which do have blind spot monitoring. And then throughout the rest of the rear. And let's set off. Okay, so we are setting off here in the Supra. And it's been quite some time since I've driven a Supra because, you know, obviously after I sold this, I haven't really reviewed any. And one thing I do want to mention is, again, this is on lowering springs, but these lowering springs really didn't do much to change the stock ride quality. It rides pretty much the same stock as it does with these lowering springs. So I just want to mention that because I think that that's a huge difference between both these cars, is actually the ride quality with them. Now, aside from that, seat comfort's pretty good with the Supra. We'll kind of compare it to the Z once we take the Z out. Now, obviously, this is kind of an apples to oranges comparison because, you know, this is an automatic Supra and then we've got a manual Z. But, I mean, you still can't buy a manual Supra quite yet. And so, you know, I think it's somewhat fair, right? Because if you wanted to go out and you can order a Z now pretty much, but if you wanted to go out and order a Supra, you can only order an automatic. Aside from that, it's good. So like over smooth roads, it's solid from a ride quality perspective. But once you go over bumps, it kind of comes uncomposed a little bit. And that's something that I remembered when I owned the car that I wasn't a fan of, especially the front end. The front end has quite a bit of lift to it. You know, it has a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which is great for corners and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I always remember that it kind of had a little bit of lift to it. But one thing that's awesome about the Supra, it sounds amazing. And it's quick. You know, this BMW engine that they have in the Supra is definitely super torquey at low RPMs. And I mean, it gets the, you can see it gets the tires spinning. It gets the tires going. And it's kind of an interesting experience because you really have to pay attention with the Supra when you're driving it. It's like a drift car. Basically is one of the ways that I kind of look at it because of, you know, the power and the handling dynamics and all of that. It kind of like it's squirrely. It goes all over the place. It is such an interesting experience. We'll try to get a full acceleration here. It's cutting power because it cannot get traction, and so it's just cutting power like crazy. Now obviously I could take the traction control off, but then I'm just going to be doing like a burnout, right? I'm not going to do a burnout with a dealership's car, okay? I'd rather have it cut power. And look at, it's not too bad over the train tracks actually, but yeah, definitely a little bit rougher from a ride quality perspective. That is for sure. Sounds so good though. And these gear shifts are like instantaneous. They are literally like so quick. I will make a quick comparison to the Nissan Z's, you know, automatic transmission. It's very smooth, like this transmission with upshifts and downshifts. I do think that this one, I went the wrong way. I do think that this one though, on the other hand, is just slightly slightly quicker. Okay, so continuing along in the Supra, let's kind of, I guess, cap things off with the driving with this car. So definitely, you know, has that sports car feel with the suspension where it is a little bit on the rougher side of things. And just because of the setup with this car, it definitely is, it's tail happy. That's the best way to look at it. It is definitely a tail happy car. And so this is like the burnout slash drift JDM car. And it definitely, you know, takes a bit to get used to, you know, controlling this car. Again, that's something that I remembered is like, you definitely have to give quite a bit of respect to this car. Like, you can't just jump in and go full throttle all the time. Like, you've got to get used to the car. And you know, everyone knows that Toyota, you know, underrates this in terms of the horsepower and torque. And so it definitely feels a lot faster than the rating suggests with this car. Overall, I mean, it's a great car. It's a ton of fun, but that's kind of the driving experience you get with the Supra. Is definitely feels, you know, like you're in. It handles amazingly well, but it definitely feels like you're just kind of like on the edge all the time, and that it could just bite your head off at any moment. Super quick though. Tons of. I love the low end torque feel of this car. This car, you definitely, like, you can go all the way to redline, but this is the car that you kind of like, you drive off of the torque basically. So like you pretty much short shift sometimes because you have so much torque that you don't really need to go all the way up, really. I mean, look at here, for example, like I'll go all the way up to redline. It lets you bounce off a little bit. That's another cool thing about the Supra. But yeah, it's just an interesting experience. But let's see how the Z compares. Well, let's talk about visibility before we set off here. Here's your visibility over the hood, both of the mirrors, and then throughout the rest of the rear with the Z. And since we got a manual first gear, let's set off. Okay, so we are now setting off in the Z. So the first thing that I've noticed about the Z is it puts down the power so much better compared to the Supra. Like I said, the Supra is your JDM burnout machine. This, on the other hand, is, you know, I guess, like, more refined is what I'd have to say. We're gonna actually go around that because there's tons of rocks. This is a lot more refined from, you know, the acceleration perspective. You don't get the same tire slipping, and it doesn't feel like it's cutting power like crazy like what the Supra is doing, because the Supra has to, because the wheels are just spinning out like no other, whereas this, it just puts it down. The best way to like describe this for you, since a lot of you haven't driven this yet, or potentially haven't driven a Supra, is the Supra feels like a rear-wheel drive car. This feels like a an all-wheel drive car without the, like, you know, understeer that you get in a normal all-wheel drive car, if that makes sense. And so it just has that planted feel. It almost feels like a baby GTR. The other thing is, going over bumps and everything, I feel like I can go over them at like higher speeds with this car, because again, it stays flat and planted, feels more compliant. Definitely has like more of like a luxury car ride to it. And something else is, I like the feeling of the steering wheel a little bit more. And like I said, seat comfort's better in the Z as well. These seats, like, they hold you in place better, and it's just a better seat overall. Nissan definitely looked at the Supra and they're like, let's beat it. You can still get tail happy though with the Z. You guys could hear like cutting power there. That was not intentional. I guess that loose gravel kind of got to us a little bit. But we're not going to do the exact same driving route because, well, fine, we'll do the exact same. I was about to say, we're not going to do the same driving route because I got to go back the other way, but, you know, just for video continuity's sake, we'll do pretty much the same route with both of the vehicles. That was crazy that it just like slides. It's very manageable though. Like, this is controllable. So the other thing that I want to talk about with this stepping out is this feels so controllable. With the Supra, like I said, I feel like I'm on the edge. I feel like I'm about to lose the car. This, on the other hand, I feel like, yeah, I'm on that edge, but I also feel like I'm completely in control, and like I still can, you know, bring it back in if I want to. That's kind of the key difference I've noticed with the driving dynamics. Now, a lot of people are gonna be wondering with speed, and we have seen some of those like drag races with this and, you know, with the Supra, and, you know, the Supra does win in the drag races. So in the real world, and we're probably gonna step out a little bit here. It's so fun. In the real world, this feels like more than enough power. But there is definitely like a key difference. The Supra, you get like this low-end torquey push, and then it kind of dies off at the top of the power band. This feels like it pulls all the way through the power band. And so with the Supra, when I'm driving it, I'm just kind of like feathering the throttle initially because it's like no grip, and then you finally get grip, and then you go full throttle, and then you kind of like short shift a little bit because, again, like I said, the power band seems to like die off at the edge. This, on the other hand, I'm like full throttle right out of the gate, and on top of that, I'm like going all the way to redline like this. The tachometer is like asking you to rev it out, because it's like, it looks like I'm at like nothing on the tachometer when I'm just going at like normal RPMs, and so it's like you feel like you're not moving unless you're like 3,000-4,000 RPMs. It's like Nissan's like, we want you to rev this out. But yeah, the point that I'm trying to make is, in the real world, because of like the low end torque you get with the Supra, it definitely feels, you know, punchy right off the bat, but then it gets no grip. And so the actual speed feels very similar in real world conditions. Even though with the drag races and everything, the Supra's been winning, it's just like I can get grip with this car. Okay, so which one would I pick? Supra or new Nissan Z? And here's the deal. I like different exterior elements on both the cars. I think they're both great looking cars. This interior feels more unique because like it's the Z's interior, right? This is not an interior shared with other cars. The Supra's interior is nice, right? It's a BMW interior, it's very nice, but it doesn't have like the unique feel that this interior has because it's shared with a bunch of BMW models, right? So there's that. Now, from a driving characteristic perspective, I prefer grip. I prefer controllability. That's my preference. Like, I don't like driving, like, I think it's so weird. Car journalists are always talking about how they want like a car that like is gonna just, you know, bite their head off. That's what they always talk about. They're like, oh, it's so thrilling that this car is just, you know, it's uncontrollable, this and that, right? I'm not into that. I like control. I want like controlled speed, and that's what the Z gives me. And then the big thing is the pricing, right? This fully loaded is less money than the Supra by like a substantial amount, quite a bit less. And so like, if I look at this from a value perspective, I could go and buy a base model Z with just as much horsepower, right, as the Supra, and then I would have tons of money for modifications. So yeah, again, it's definitely a tough choice. They're both great cars, but if it's my money that I'm spending, I feel like the Z's the better value right now. The Supra is just so expensive that, yeah, it's just like they've almost like priced themselves into a whole new realm. This is still like an affordable, I see it as like an affordable, fun sports car that has tons of power. The Supra, on the other hand, is kind of like, it's like a Porsche Cayman competitor now from a price point perspective, and so it's like a luxury sports car at that point from a pricing perspective, at least. I want to hear what you guys have to say, which one you would pick. But after driving both of them and after owning a Supra and now, you know, living with this for a week, I'm gonna pick the Z.